Welcome to Short Consulting's series on bringing on individuals into your organization. And this specific video is for those solopreneurs out there that are going, I'm ready to scale my business, and quite honestly, I'm scared to death to hire on my first employee. What does that look like? What are the ramifications of that? How do I even go about doing that? So that's what we're going to discuss in this video. And I'm also going to name, there's a number of items that we're going to touch on very briefly in this video that you will find either in the HR Foundation course or later videos, and I'll name that as we go through. So the first thing that we look at when we're looking at hiring on a new employee is, what is that need? What specifically will that employee be doing for you? And there's two things that we need to look at there. One is the job description. So we talk very, significantly about that in another video about what needs to be included in the job description as far as those essential duties and what is behind those essential duties and how you write that from the legal perspective of ensuring that you are complying with all of the labor laws. The next thing that you'll do is you'll want to know exactly what you're looking for in that individual. So the job description talks about skill sets. The ideal employee profile really talks about who that individual is, so that you're attracting that right individual for the culture of your organization. And we have another video that talks through what an ideal employee profile is and a worksheet to complete that. But that's essentially who that individual is that you're bringing into your organization. Then the next thing is really defining what that organizational culture is for your company. And why that's so important is those individuals coming in need to have an expectation of what are they signing on to and how they go about doing their work. So there's a couple things within that company culture, and we also discussed this in another video, but I'm going to talk about those key 3 points. And one is, what is the feel of your organization? Are you very, very rigid and everything is very rules oriented? Is it an organization that is very loose? Is it an organization that is, what we are 100% committed to both serving our employees and serving our clients with 5-star high quality service every single time? So whatever that is for you, having that defined, otherwise the culture starts to define itself. So that's the feel. How do you want that to feel for you? How do you want that to feel for your employees? And how do you want that to feel for your clients or your customers coming in? Do your clients and customers feel welcome, that they are top priority every single time you're with them, that you have amazing follow through, that you honor what you say you're going to do, etc. So that is the feel of the organization. The next is clarity. So are you clear on what those expectations are? And when we look at that clarity for your employees, what that is that could be as simple as, hey, we expect that we return every single communication within 24 hours during normal business hours. And when you are not going to be in the office, you have an out of office on. That's clarity, right? Clarity could also be, it is an expectation that when a client asks you a question that you find an answer to that and you use the team to do that. Clarity could be, we are one team, even though we are in 3 or 4 different locations, we act and we serve as one team. So we don't have, individual egos being higher than others because we're one team and that one team serves our clients. So those are some examples of clarity inside of the organization. Another example would be, we believe in that work hard, play hard culture where yes, we're going to work extremely hard when we're here and we're 100% focused, but when we're off, we are truly off. And the key here is not just in what we say in those values up on a wall somewhere, but in how we embody that and we do that day to day. So for example, you as a business owner, you may be working at 1 a.m. I know I am sometimes, but I'm not emailing clients and employees at 1 a.m. I may send that email, but I may have a delay on that, so they don't receive that until 8 a.m. So they don't then feel like they have to respond to that email at all hours of day, night, weekend, whatever that is. So that's clarity when you're defining your culture. It's not just what you say, but it's also what you do and how you treat individuals inside of that organization. And then is alignment. And we talk a lot about this in the ideal employee profile. Is your company aligned with what the individual's personal mission is? So those two things need to be very much aligned. So that's an example of, as we get started, hey, you're ready to bring on your first employee. Fantastic. So have we defined then, who it is we're looking for, both from the skill set perspective and from the perspective of the type of individual they are? Have we defined their culture so we're truly hiring the right person in for that? And then we're going to now get into, what you need from that kind of that legal standpoint. And so I have a checklist here for you, and you're going to see this out there as well. You can pull this checklist and really use this as you're going through. So the first one is, do you have workers' compensation insurance? So workers' comp insurance is something that you have to have if you even have one employee. And if you have independent contractors, what I'd say is make sure that you have that written in your contract for your independent contractors. Now that is a separate course, and that there's a whole separate checklist for that. So note that that's separate. Do you have a payroll company, or do you have a way to pay those individuals, and ensuring that when you're going through and you're paying those individuals that you're following what all of your state and federal laws are? Do you have unemployment set up? So anytime you hire your first employee, you have to have that unemployment and that workers' compensation set up in that specific state. So let's say that you're not just hiring your first employee, you're going to hire your first 3 employees, and they're all remote in 3 different states. You need to have those 2 things, workers' compensation and unemployment insurance, set up in all 3 of those states. The next is being registered with your state Department of Workforce Development. So that kind of goes hand in hand with that unemployment. And then the next is, do you have a handbook? So when you hire one employee, there is a litany of laws that you now are required to follow. And this runs from OSHA to, which is Occupational Safety and Health Administration, to EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity, so and Department of Labor. So there's a number of different laws that you need to follow. That employee handbook is really important in ensuring that the individuals have a firm understanding of what specifically they are required to follow, and you as an organization know, yep, these are the rules that we're following, these are the laws, and we have those set in place. And then the next thing is really looking at what is that onboarding and that orientation plan specifically for those individuals. And sometimes onboarding and orientation gets blended into one thing, and they're really 2 separate. And that distinction between onboarding and orientation is this. Orientation is very much about that legal paperwork side of it and orienting you to the location, the people, and the tools that you're going to use inside your organization. So that orientation for a new employee is the people, the tools, and the location that you're going to be using. Now, onboarding is a much longer process. So the onboarding process is really looking at how do we integrate the individual into the fabric of the organization. So that is looking at the relationships, that's looking at the culture. So that's very different than the orientation piece, but the orientation piece must still happen, and that comes first. So that is an overview of what are the things that I need to do when I'm first bringing on a new employee. What are the things that I need to consider? And so you will find that you have a checklist out there for you to take a look at that really goes through what those key things are. And I'm going to talk through those, and this will be somewhat of a repeat of what we just covered. So once you decide to hire someone on, we've already talked about hiring someone on, what that looks like, what to have set up before you hire them on. We talked about our handbook, our job description, our ideal employee profile. Now, that application. So do you have an application that is out there for that individual to complete? And I always recommend having an application, and here's why. That application typically has some sort of acknowledgement on it. That acknowledgement essentially states that that individual agrees that they have not falsified anything in their application. If they have, you can then terminate them for that. When you're only accepting resumes, there's nothing there that says, hey, I haven't falsified my application or where I worked or my education. And that's really important. So I always recommend having both the application and requesting that resume and cover letter from the individual. Now you need to make sure that there's nothing illegal on that application based on the state you're in. For example, the ban the box laws. And again, we talk about that in another training. The second one is, do you have an offer letter? So what is an offer letter? So an offer letter is what you're giving the individual to show them, yep, I offered you this position on this specific date, this title, this salary or hourly amount. And again, there's another whole training on that. But you need to have an offer letter that says this is your start date of employment. The next is you need to have that, that job description, the employee handbook. So then when they come in, this is the orientation piece, right? Their new hire paperwork. The W-4 form is a federal form that they are going to need to complete. This is their tax status. The next is the I-9 form. Again, there's a whole nother training for both of these, but that I-9 form is that they legally are able to work in the United States. The next is then getting them what their work schedule is so they know exactly what the work schedule is, if you offer benefits, what those are, so you're really clear on that. And that covers the orientation section. So this completes this section of the training where we go through and talk specifically about what you need when you bring individuals into your organization. And again, you have a checklist to follow, and there is a number of additional classes that go into much deeper detail to that. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you so much for joining us today.